Welcome to my video where I'm going to show you how to mark your square dowels. So at the end, your goal is that each one of them will have marks on two of the adjacent faces on each end, and the other side won't have any marks. And the goal in that is the next step is to cut these dados grooves on those two faces. So where you mark is going to be what gets cut away on two of the faces there and there. And you do that on both ends. And that's how the frame part, the top and the bottom, are going to fit on. So I have my 4 dowels. I cut them all to the same length. Your length might be different. Mine is 12 inches. So before I start, I'm going to need some tools besides my dowels. I'm going to need a ruler that can measure at least the length of my dowels, and it's also helpful to have a square for marking, and also we can measure with the ruler part of that. All right, now before you start, you're going to need to do a little bit of math. And the math that you need to do, I'm going to explain and draw this out for you with this example here in mind. Now, this particular example here is different than these. Was designed to fit an 11-inch piece of paper here. And so this was marked and cut so that paper would fit in between this part and this part, as that's where those frame parts are going to go later on. Now, to figure out where this goes, we need to start by knowing the height or the length of each one of these. I'm going to use these as an example. Mine measure 12 inches. Yours might be different. And if I just sketch this out so you can see it, suppose this is my 12-inch long piece. So my height is 12 inches. Now I want this designed so that an 8-inch piece of paper is going to go exactly in the middle. And I already have a piece of paper just to illustrate this. And I want to know exactly where the center part is. So I need that paper in the middle, which is my paper height. I'll call it P. It's going to be 8 inches. Now I need to do a little bit of calculation to figure out where those notches are going to go on each side of this. So I know the 12 inches and the 8 inches, the height of my lamp and the paper height from my design. Yours is probably different. So you're going to want to look back at that and figure out what your measurements are. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what the difference is between these two. So if we take the total height of your lamp, which is this length here, on mine it's 12, yours might be different, and I subtract the paper height, that's going to get me, I don't know, I'll call that like the top and the bottom. So imagine that, from here to here is what we're going to call the bottom of the lamp, and say from here to here is the top of the lamp. So if we subtract those, that leftover part is going to be that top and bottom part together. The top plus the bottom part. Now I'll do that calculation on my numbers. Yours might be different. I have 12 inches minus 8 inches. And my leftover top and bottom together is 4 inches. So that's this amount plus this amount. Now yours might be different than that, but to figure out how much goes to each one of those, I'm going to take that amount, the top and the bottom together, and I'm going to divide it in half, divide by 2. So for mine, it's 4 inches divided by 2, which is going to give me 2 inches. 2 inches are going to go up here. 2 inches are going to go over here. So now I have this all diagrammed out. My total length of my dowels is 12 inches. My paper height is 8 inches, and I need 2 inches on the top and bottom. Yours might be the same, they might be different. but this is really based on your height that you've chosen and the paper height that you chose for your lamp. Now that I know those, I'm going to use those to mark one of these. And I'm going to do that with a pencil. I am going to measure from one end this amount. On mine it's 2 inches. And I'm going to use the square here. This is 0. And I'm going to count over to 2 inches. Now that 2 inches is the amount between the end of the dowel and the top of the dado groove. Now each one of these dado grooves is 3/4 inches wide. So I'm going to look at my ruler, see where I marked that, and I'm going to count back 3/4 of an inch. So on this ruler, every one of these marks is an 1/8. So I'm going to be looking for these marks here. I'm going to count back 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Now, how do I know I measured it correctly? Well, there's a trick here. Your dowels are all 3/4 inches wide. So if you wanted to, you could put this across here and use this as a guideline for how thick this needs to be. If you wanted to, you could even use that as a straight edge. So when I cut this later, there's going to be a part of the lamp that fits right here where my finger is, right where that groove is, and then I'm going to have this much sticking out the bottom. How much is it? It doesn't really matter. We don't need to measure that. We can figure that out when we go to the table saw to cut that dado groove. So I have that marked on one end. I'm going to do the same thing to the other end. I'm going to start on the end and measure that way this amount, which is 2 inches, with my pencil. So 2 inches. And then I want to put that groove in here, and it should be 3/4 inches away. I'm going to use one of my other dowels, which I know is that length, to measure it. Then I don't need to worry about the ruler part. And I use the straight edge and the square here to mark this other part. All right. Now I have those marked. I can look at it and say, oh, is this the same distance from each end? Did I do that correctly? Answer is yes. You could change this at this point in your design if you want these to be in a different place or the paper location to be different. This would be the time to make that decision. Now when I go to cut this, I need to cut that out on 2 faces. So I'm going to need to transfer and mark this on another face. Now some of you might be wondering, when you put your lamp together, where does this show up on your lamp? And the answer is the part that you mark and the part that you cut shows to the outside of the lamp. That's the part that you see. So if part of your lamp looks like you like that part of the wood better, then you can have that on the outside. All right, I'm going to use the straight edge here and the square to transfer these lines along an adjacent face. Do it on that end. Now we'll do it on this end. One more thing that I will do before I continue on marking the rest of mine is just double check the measurement between those markings. And I wanted mine to be at 8 inches because that's the size of the paper I wanted. So I'm starting at 0 here and I measured to 8. And yes, it looks like it. And I cut a piece of paper at 8 inches just to double check this. And I want it to maybe be just inside of those lines. And it looks like that's going to work. The last thing I'm going to do with these is I'm going to scribble that out. And the reason I'm going to scribble it out is that's the part that I'm going to cut away. That part's going to get cut away later. And so I mark that so that I know when I get to the saw which part is going to go away. And then the other parts would get kept. That part's going to show on the outside of the lamp. All right. Now, I could do that same thing to all other 3, and it would take a little while. But we can use a little trick here by lining these all up. making sure that they're all flat on one end. So I'm going to use another board or something straight. And then I'm going to hold these together with my straight edge. And I'm going to take the measurement I already have and I'm going to transfer that line all the way up along there. I'm going to do the same with the others. I know the first one's right. I can copy those, transfer those lines all the way along very quickly without needing to do any more measurement. And then I know they're all the same as well. All right. And then I could scribble those out. Those parts are going away later on. Now I'm going to do the same with a different face. So I'm going to turn these all so that that next face is facing up. And make sure that they're all lined up, top and bottom. Then I'll transfer those lines across. And I'll scribble those so I know those parts get cut. So when you're finished, all 4 of your pieces should be marked on 2 adjacent faces, top and bottom. So check them. Yep, top and bottom, top and bottom. And after you have those marks, you're ready to do the next step, which is cutting these dado grooves to look like this.